Good day, and welcome again to Learning Pharmacology with me, Nurse Myron. For today's learning activity, we will be discussing antibiotics. For our full disclosure, I am not affiliated with any of the manufacturers of the drugs or other items mentioned in this lecture. The mention of such brand names are only in passing and for educational purposes only, and are not for commercial promotion. I have no actual or potential conflict of interest in relation to this presentation. So let us begin with an introduction to bacteria and how antibiotics work against them. Antibiotics work in many different ways against bacteria. These drugs can interfere with protein synthesis, can prevent bacteria from using substances for growth and development, eventually hindering their growth and killing them. A good number of bacteria alter either the cell wall biosynthesis or the cell membrane permeability, which makes the bacteria susceptible to the outside elements. And lastly, some antibiotics interfere with DNA synthesis, eventually destroying the bacteria from within. But before we go further, we should understand the basic concept between a bactericidal and a bacteriostatic. A bactericidal, from the name itself "cide", means it is an agent or a chemical that kills bacteria, whereas a bacteriostatic does not necessarily kill the bacteria but simply hinders any further growth, from the word stasis, to stay, to put on hold. Antibacterials or your antibiotics can be classified either as broad-spectrum or narrow-spectrum agents. Broad-spectrum antibiotics work against a wide range of pathogens, while your narrow-spectrum antibiotics are highly potent, but they target only specific kinds or classes of bacteria. So looking at this table, we have a wide array of different pathogens ranging from MRSA or your methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, your Enterococci, your gram-positive and your gram-negative organisms, Pseudomonas, and other anaerobic bacteria. And we can see here in the lower part the different kinds of antibiotics that generally work against them. So for example, your wide or broad-spectrum antibiotics include imipenem, meropenem, doripenem, and ertapenem, your carbapenems, because they act on many different kinds of bacteria, including your gram-positive, gram-negative, your anaerobes, and even your ESBLs. However, if you take a look at some cephalosporins, especially your first generation, like your cefazolin, these are seen as effective only for gram-positive bacteria, which makes them as narrow-spectrum antibiotics. Let us now discuss the human immune response and anti-infective therapy. Anti-infective therapy here takes on the whole range of anti-infective drugs, not only your antibiotics. So these will include antivirals, antihelminths, antiprotozoals, etc. The goal here is to reduce the pathogen, like in our case for antibiotics, to reduce the number of bacteria present in the host to allow the natural immune system of the person to eliminate the infection. This is a careful balance between killing as much as possible all the pathogens while protecting the cells of the host. Overly aggressive eradication risks toxicity to the host, which can manifest in different adverse effects, or side effects to the patient. We should also learn about resistance of bacteria against certain antibiotics. Natural resistance, also known as intrinsic resistance, is present in some bacteria where they naturally lack target structures or pathways that makes the drugs naturally ineffective against them in the first place. However, what is more alarming as a trend nowadays in modern healthcare is the emergence of acquired resistance. Here, certain bacteria that were once sensitive to certain antibiotics eventually develop resistance. These can be through the development of certain enzymes or chemicals that can combat the effects of the chemical in the antibiotic, which is intended to kill them. This eventually leads to treatment failures because the drugs become ineffective. Bacteria have evolved to develop resistance against certain antibiotics. For example, certain bacteria have now developed enzymes that deactivate the antibiotic, such as in the case of beta-lactamases, which we will be discussing in a while. Likewise, certain bacteria can produce antagonistic chemicals to counteract the effect of the drug. In addition, bacteria have evolved their cell membrane permeability to block the entry of the drug into the cell. Also, modification of transport mechanisms and changes in the binding sites on ribosomes or membranes have helped certain bacteria to develop resistance against antibiotics. As nurses, members of the healthcare team, it is our duty to prevent bacterial resistance against certain antibiotics. We should remember to use antibiotics only for infections that have been confirmed to be sensitive to the drug. Likewise, we should specifically use antibiotics only against bacteria. Antibiotics are not effective and in fact are not indicated for viruses, for protozoans, and other pathogens. As nurses, we should also advocate for the complete administration of the doses for the full prescribed duration. Nowadays, it is common for doctors to prescribe antibiotics for 7 days, even up to 10 days. As nurses, we should make sure that our patients continue taking these antibiotics even beyond the phase where they are already feeling way better. By completing the full dose, we are assured that all bacteria present in the host have been eliminated successfully. We should also advocate against indiscriminate or inappropriate antibiotic use. For example, you have two patients or a patient who asks his neighbor who had fever a few weeks ago. The normal scenario is that your patient will ask his or her neighbor, "Anong ininom mong gamot?" "Ay, uminom ako ng gantong antibiotic." "Sige na nga, iinom na nga rin ako niyan para sa ubo ko." Makainom na nga niyan, makabili na nga sa pharmacy o sa drugstore niyang parehong ininom mong gamot at yan na rin ang iinumin ko. This creates a dangerous situation where the antibiotic being taken by your patient is not specifically suited for whatever pathogen he is carrying in his body. This helps the bacteria to develop resistance. Here I have developed my own mnemonic to help you better memorize the different classifications of antibiotics that we will be discussing in this lecture. So you have A, antibiotics can protect the queen's man, children, servants, and guards. So to help you better memorize this, I have included the picture of the late Queen Elizabeth of United Kingdom, her loving husband Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and of course the now King Charles, her eldest child, who took over the throne after the death of Queen Elizabeth. Then in the last two pictures you have the servants and the guards protecting the Queen. So what does this mnemonic stand for? A is your aminoglycosides, C is your cephalosporin, P is for penicillin, T is for tetracycline, Q you have your quinolones or sometimes referred to as fluoroquinolones, M stands for macrolides, C is for your carbapenems, S is for your sulfonamide, and G is for your glycopeptide. So let us start with your aminoglycosides. First, your aminoglycosides include examples such as your streptomycin given as an IM injection. You have your gentamicin and amikacin, which can be given IM or IV. And you have your tobramycin eye drops. Aminoglycosides are effective against gram-negative bacteria, such as your Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Escherichia coli, certain species of Klebsiella, Enterobacter, Serratia, Citrobacter, and Staphylococcus species. Aminoglycosides inhibit protein synthesis, especially in the 30S. As nurses, we should remember that aminoglycosides are poorly absorbed in the GI tract. That is why, if you have noticed in the examples, most if not all are given intramuscularly or intravenously, with tobramycin being an ointment typically given for eye infections. Aminoglycosides are widely distributed and can cross the placenta and enter breast milk. That is why care should be observed when giving aminoglycosides to pregnant mothers or to breastfeeding women. Aminoglycosides are nephrotoxic and hepatotoxic and can cause damage in the cranial nerve 8, in particular your streptomycin. That is why streptomycin is considered as ototoxic. These drugs, because of their severe adverse effects, are generally contraindicated during pregnancy. Moving on, we have your cephalosporins. This group is one of the largest groups of antibiotics presently available in use in healthcare settings. Cephalosporins were developed in the 1940s from Cephalosporium fungus, now renamed as your Acremonium fungus. Cephalosporins are effective both for gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. Presently, there are 5 generations of cephalosporins available in the market. The effects depend on which generation the particular drug is under. In general, cephalosporins work by inhibiting cell wall synthesis, which makes the bacteria more susceptible to the outside elements. Cephalosporins are absorbed well in the GI tract and is considered generally safe for pregnancy. So you can see here in the photo some examples of famous cephalosporins currently available in the market, like cefuroxime, ceftazidime, ceftriaxone, and even cephalexin. In general, cephalosporins are taken with food, so avoid administering oral cephalosporins on an empty stomach. Also, we should be assessing for any allergic reactions and monitoring for any side effects such as GI upset like nausea and vomiting or diarrhea, and any bleeding tendencies in patients. So here are some more examples of cephalosporins such as your Cefaclor, cefepime, and ceftaroline. Remember that cephalosporins are very numerous and they all come in oral, such as tablet or syrup form for children, or injectable forms can be given in IV or IM injections. So here in this table, I am presenting the 5 generations of your cephalosporins. As nurses, these details are nice to know. It helps us to understand better the pharmacology of certain antibiotics. But ultimately, the decision on which generation of antibiotic, of which generation of cephalosporin is indicated to the patient, ultimately falls on the physician. So first generation cephalosporins include your cefazolin and cefalexin. They are not effective for aerobic bacteria. They are good against gram-positive bacteria such as your Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. And they are generally okay but not very strong against gram-negative bacteria such as your E. coli or Klebsiella species. Second generation cephalosporins include the popular cefuroxime, available in IV and in oral forms, and cefaclor. Generally, second generation cephalosporins are better than the first generation because they are effective against aerobic bacteria. They are still good against gram-positive bacteria, but generally less effective than the first generation for Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. But they are also better against gram-negative bacteria compared with your first generation cephalosporins. Third generation cephalosporins, including your ceftriaxone, cefixime, and ceftazidime, are generally not good against aerobic bacteria. They're also so-so, quite okay against gram-positive bacteria. However, third generation cephalosporins are very effective against gram-negative bacteria, including hospital-acquired pneumonias such as your Pseudomonas, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and Enterobacter species. Fourth generation cephalosporins like your cefepime are similarly good for gram-positive bacteria. However, the main benefit of fourth generation cephalosporins are against your Pseudomonas. Just like the third generation cephalosporins, fourth generation cephalosporins are not used against aerobic bacteria. The newest generation, the fifth generation cephalosporins, so far the only popular drug under this category is your ceftaroline. This has been tested to be very good against aerobic bacteria. The effect against gram-positive bacteria, being a new kind of or a new generation of cephalosporin, is still under study and is currently placed as varied. For gram-negative bacteria, fifth generation cephalosporins also have varied effects. Let us now move on to one of the earliest kinds of antibiotics that were developed for healthcare use, the penicillin. Penicillins are effective against both gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. Penicillin examples include penicillin, ampicillin, and even methicillin. They are quite easy to memorize because they all end with the suffix -cillin. Penicillins work by inhibiting cell wall synthesis, and they are generally considered as safe for pregnancy. The photo on the right side of this presentation shows you the chemical structure in general of all penicillins. So you have on the right side a pentagon shape, and on the left side you have your beta-lactam as a square. So generally, regular bacteria like gram-positive Staphylococcus are sensitive against penicillins. However, as I discussed earlier regarding antibiotic and bacterial resistance, these bacteria have eventually evolved and they develop a certain resistance against penicillin. That is why basic forms of penicillin such as your ampicillin or penicillin or methicillin are now not commonly used because they are no longer that effective against certain bacteria. As was discussed earlier, certain bacteria have evolved over time. These bacteria have developed an enzyme known as your beta-lactamase, which in essence destroys the beta-lactam portion of your antibiotics. When these beta-lactam portions are inhibited or destroyed by the beta-lactamase, the antibiotic becomes ineffective. That is why modern science has developed what we now call your beta-lactamase inhibitor. This chemical is added to certain penicillins to make it more powerful against the bacteria that have developed beta-lactamase. For example, amoxicillin is the penicillin, and combined with potassium clavulanate, the beta-lactamase inhibitor, to produce the combination drug which we now call your co-amoxiclav under the brand name Augmentin. Ampicillin, combined with beta-lactamase inhibitor sulbactam, is now known as Unasyn, the brand name for Ampisul or ampicillin sulbactam. However, again, bacteria continuously evolve over time and they are now more powerful than ever, especially your Pseudomonas. That is why certain penicillins have been developed further so that their spectrum will be more potent against these kind of bacteria. These include your piperacillin and your ticarcillin. To make them even more powerful against Pseudomonas, piperacillin is now combined with beta-lactamase inhibitor known as tazobactam to produce the combination antibiotic piperacillin-tazobactam under the brand name Piptazo. Ticarcillin is now combined with clavulanate to produce the antibiotic under the brand name Timentin. These two have been tested and are found to be very effective against Pseudomonas bacteria. So here are some examples of the penicillins that we have mentioned. So you have your ampicillin, this is your Piptaz or another brand name for piperacillin tazobactam, locally available here in the Philippines. You have your co-amoxiclav, as we mentioned before, your Augmentin. And quite popular, basic penicillin given as prophylactic after dental surgery, minor tooth extractions, no? You have your amoxicillin. So penicillins come either in oral form, in tablets, or in syrup preparations for children, or in powder form to be given parenterally. Let us now move on to the next classification of antibiotics. You have your tetracyclines. Tetracyclines are effective against both gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. Examples include tetracycline, which bears the same name as the classification, and your doxycycline. Tetracyclines are bacteriostatic in that they inhibit further bacterial growth but not necessarily killing the bacteria. Tetracyclines work by inhibiting protein synthesis in the 30S. One of the more popular antibiotics under this category is your doxycycline. Doxycycline is indicated as treatment against leptospirosis caused by the spirochete Leptospira interrogans. Aside from treating leptospirosis, doxycycline is also given as a prophylactic drug for people who may be or will be exposed to flood waters that may contain the bacteria Leptospira interrogans. As a prophylactic drug, a single dose is given to patients who have open wounds, especially in the lower portions of their body, or who have been exposed in the flood up to the waist, especially for women, because the flood waters may have they may have come in contact with the flood waters in their vaginal area. Very important consideration for tetracycline is that they are not indicated for children 8 years and below. Why? Because tetracycline generally harms growing bone and teeth present in children whose bones and teeth are still developing. Tetracyclines can cause yellowish discoloration in the teeth, especially among children. Likewise, when taking tetracycline, patients should avoid food rich in calcium, such as your vitamins, supplements with calcium, and even antacids, your calcium carbonate. Because calcium inhibits the use or the absorption of tetracycline in the body. Tetracyclines, because they are harmful to the bones and to the teeth, are generally contraindicated for pregnancy. Likewise, patients receiving tetracyclines should avoid sun exposure for the duration of their treatment. It is also recommended that patients should take this drug on an empty stomach, at least 1 hour before or after meals. By taking on an empty stomach, the absorption of tetracycline in the GI tract is improved. However, tetracyclines can cause heartburns. That is why, after taking the drug, the patient is encouraged to eat. Now we move to the next kind of drugs, your quinolones, also known as your fluoroquinolones. These are broad-spectrum antibiotics which are effective against gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria, including Klebsiella pneumoniae, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Haemophilus influenzae, Staphylococcus aureus, Epidermidis, and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So how do fluoroquinolones work? They inhibit DNA replication by stopping topoisomerase. Therefore, the bacteria cannot replicate and reproduce anymore. One major side effect of quinolones or your fluoroquinolones is photosensitivity, which can develop severe skin reactions. That is why, similar to tetracyclines, patients taking quinolones should avoid exposure to the sun. Quinolones are also contraindicated for pregnant women, and they should also avoid taking vitamins and antacids which contain calcium when taking quinolones. Quinolones are quite easy to remember because they end with the suffix floxacin. For example, your ciprofloxacin under the brand name Ciprobay or Zalvos, which both come in the oral tablet or the IV forms, and your levofloxacin, also available in oral and IV forms. Moving on, we have your macrolide antibiotics. Macrolides are effective only against gram-positive bacteria. They are also bacteriostatic. They don't necessarily kill the bacteria themselves. Macrolides are effective against respiratory infections that cause pneumonia. For example, your Clostridium diphtheriae, certain Mycoplasma, and Chlamydia. As bacteriostatics, macrolides inhibit protein synthesis in the 50S. Caution should be observed because macrolides can increase heart problems during pregnancy, especially in the fetus. That is why the fetal ECG should be closely monitored for mothers receiving macrolide antibiotics. Likewise, macrolide antibiotics are also hepatotoxic. Macrolides are easy to remember because they end with the suffix thromycin. Example, your erythromycin, your azithromycin under the brand name Zithromax, and clarithromycin. The brand name is Clarijet. Lincosamides are closely related and sometimes considered as a subcategory of macrolides. The most famous lincosamide is your clindamycin. The actions are similar to macrolides, but the toxicity is higher. Clindamycin is generally used for severe infections, especially involving the skin. Adverse effects include GI upset and the risk for developing secondary infections, especially from Clostridium difficile. We now move on to your carbapenems. Carbapenems are relatively new and they are quite powerful as antibiotics. Carbapenems are generally used for gram-positive bacteria, such as your Staphylococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, E. coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, B. fragilis, P. mirabilis, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Pseudomonas bivia. Examples include your ertapenem, which is not recommended for pediatric patients because it is very potent. Then you also have your meropenem, which is generally used for pseudomembranous colitis, but is contraindicated for inflammatory bowel disease. As new drugs, there is still little information on the effects of carbapenems during pregnancy. So these are the examples of your carbapenems. Together with meropenem, we have doripenem under the brand name Doribax, imipenem under the brand name Tienam, and ertapenem under the brand name Invans. All of these are locally available here in the Philippines. And all of these are available only in powder form to be given intravenously. We now move on to your sulfonamides. Sulfonamides are effective against gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. The most popular drug under this category is your sulfomethoxazole under the brand name Bactrim. Actually, Bactrim is a combination drug of sulfamethoxazole with thimetoprim. These are effective against C. trachomatis, nocardia, Haemophilus influenzae, and E. coli bacteria. In general, sulfonamides are given for urinary tract infections. Quite ironic, however, that these are used for urinary tract infections, but they are also nephrotoxic. I developed this mnemonic for you to better remember the nursing considerations related to sulfonamides. Sulfonamides, remember, sulf, S for sun, meaning avoid exposure to the sun. U, urine, because sulfonamides are nephrotoxic and therefore the nurse should closely monitor the urine output of the patient. To combat any adverse effects on the kidneys, we should encourage L, lots of water. Increasing oral fluid intake can help prevent or minimize the adverse effects of sulfonamides on the kidneys. And lastly, F. We should encourage patients to take folic acid when taking sulfonamides. We now move to your glycopeptides. Glycopeptides are considered the big guns because these are perhaps the most powerful, if not one of the most powerful, commonly available antibiotics in the market. The most popular glycopeptide we currently use is your vancomycin. Vancomycin inhibits cell synthesis. Vancomycin is considered as one of the most toxic class of antibiotics. It has many adverse effects including ototoxicity, nephrotoxicity, GI upset manifested in nausea and vomiting, and even anaphylaxis. That is why, before giving vancomycin, certain pre-medications are usually given to patients, including antihistamine like diphenhydramine to prevent any allergic reactions. Nurses should be aware to watch out for the effects of your vancomycin, including EPI, meaning edema, pruritus, and inspiratory and expiratory wheezes, which may indicate dyspnea. Vancomycin is always given as a slow IV infusion over a period of time, usually 30 minutes to 1 hour. If given too fast, vancomycin can cause burning sensation on the vein of the patient. And it can also cause what we call your red man syndrome, where the skin of the patient appears red. So if this happens, the nurse should be alert to slow down the rate of infusion of your vancomycin. A special kind of antibiotics that we will be discussing are your antimycobacterials. Antimycobacterials, from the name itself, are effective against Mycobacterium tuberculosis and even Mycobacterium leprae. So Mycobacterium tuberculosis is the causative agent of your TB, whether pulmonary TB or even extrapulmonary TB like TB of the bones, your Pott's disease, or even TB of the skin. Mycobacterium leprae is the causative agent of leprosy, or in Filipino we call it your ketong. That is why treatment against TB and leprosy are related to each other. Currently, we have the DOH program to eliminate tuberculosis among Filipinos. In this program, we use certain drugs including your isoniazid. The abbreviation used by DOH is H, rifampicin, R, pyrazinamide, Z, ethambutol, E, and your streptomycin, S. Take note that HRZE are available as tablet forms, while streptomycin is only available in injectable form given intramuscularly. These are part of the DOH National TB Control Program, or the TB DOTS, or the TB Directly Observed Treatment for chemotherapy against TB. These drugs are given free in DOH centers, even in health centers in the barangay. In general, these drugs affect bacterial DNA, which can cause the death of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria. As nurses, we should closely monitor for the possible effects of these antimicrobials, including monitoring liver function and any CNS side effects. Other side effects include itchiness for isoniazid, red-colored urine output, and sometimes even other bodily fluids for rifampicin, ototoxicity for ethambutol and for streptomycin. The combination of antimicrobacterial agents given under the present DOH program varies based on the classification of the patient. So for adults who have drug-susceptible TB, meaning the first line of antimicrobacterial drugs are still effective against them, they receive a 2-month intensive phase of isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, and your ethambutol. This is followed by a 4-month continuation phase of H&R only. For pediatric patients, the regimen is similar, but instead of 4 months, the continuation phase is lowered to 2 months. However, for certain patients who have already developed drug-resistant TB, specialized regimens may be indicated, and additional antibiotics may be given like your bedaquiline and delamide. Presently, we also have your TB prevention treatment or your TPT, which can either be a weekly regimen of a combination of these drugs or a daily regimen of rifampicin and isoniazid only for 3 months. So before we end our lecture, to help you better remember what are the nursing considerations, I have developed these 2 mnemonics. So which drugs or which patients should avoid sun exposure when taking these? Remember, fun in the sun. FTS. If a patient is taking fluoroquinolones, tetracyclines, or sulfonamides, they should avoid exposure to the sun. Again, fun in the sun. It's no fun if you get exposed to the sun when you take FTS, fluoroquinolone, tetracycline, or sulfonamide, because of the possible adverse effects that can happen to you. Next is move the food away. Remember that not all antibiotics require a full stomach. In fact, some of them are better absorbed by the body when taken on an empty stomach, or at least 30 minutes to 1 hour before meals. So move the food away is MFA. Macrolides, fluoroquinolones or your quinolones, and your ampicillins. So that ends our discussion on antibiotics, and I hope that you learned a lot about these kinds of drugs that are indicated against bacterial infections. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.